So this is a great question. Someone who just found me, I'll try and move out of the way, was talking about offering a release, giving the horse a spatial release, but also discussing the horse who charges forward. And this isn't something that I've shown in recent videos. It was more engaging the horse's brain to reawaken that curiosity, to get the horse to offer to come over to participate. One of the things that I want to bring up, and of course I can't give a full answer in a 3-minute video, but one of the things I want to bring up is many horses have been taught aggressive and defensive behavior because of their previous human experiences imposing constant pressure, whether it was driving or chasing or making or yielding or containment or so on. And horses kind of have two common options. They either are trying to flee, which is most natural, and get away, or if that doesn't work and there's enough, I'm going to say, reprimand from the human interaction, you're going to start to see horses that actually try and do the unnatural response, which is to push against the pressure or into the human, whether it's spatially or literally physically. And so these are the horses we're seeing that wind up charging. I had a young warm blood mare come in. She was 2.5 and already 17 two-hands, and she had learned how to physically move people out of her way, running right over the top of them and running through things, running over fences and so on when she was reaching that anticipative or fearful state. So, you know, one of the things that I like to mention in here is when I'm working with most of these horses, especially in the beginning, as we're in that assessment, period of, recognizing what their triggers are, whether it's spatial, whether it's physical, and anything to do with the human, and watching their patterns of coping mechanisms, is to start from usually much farther away than what most people think they can interact with the horse in order for the horse to acknowledge them. And so I find if the horse is currently in that fearful defensive state where they become what we would call aggressive or going after us or charging at us, then the closer we are, the less time we have to influence what's about to happen. And, for a lot of people, they are anticipating the big or dramatic, especially with horses that come towards people and rear and strike or lunge and bite. I see it in stallions, not just stallions, but it's something that comes up. And so people are waiting till that big dramatic moment, not recognizing how often the horse is actually asking and checking in from much farther away. But because the initial behaviors are more subtle, they tend to be ignored. So when I'm working with a horse who has that coping defense of taking over and inserting themselves or pushing or coming at or actually lunging or chasing at the human, I'm going to create a much bigger spatial boundary as we're starting the interaction to where that horse can learn to stop and acknowledge me from much farther away than maybe I would with a horse who was always searching how to flee and avoid the interaction. But one of the big things that we have to recognize, whether the horse is fleeing or trying to charge and take over, is that when that horse is in that mentally anticipative state, they're not available to consider and address the human. So part of interrupting their patterns, whichever it is that they choose to do, is interrupting that constant anticipative where they look, they see, and they're ready to go. And they're not really thinking. They're not, they're emotional. You'll see them kind of all over the place. You'll see them in a highly physically tense state and so on. And so if the horse is farther away and I start to walk in and that horse turns its head towards me, even from 100 feet away, it doesn't matter how far, 50 feet away, and there's a tightness in that horse's ears and there's a hardness in its eye, from there, I will actually ask that horse to move off and move away from me, because I'm looking at the very initial signs of that horse telling me, not asking, but telling me that they're about to take over, and I need to interrupt that pattern. If I am waiting, not on purpose, but that's what people tend to do, until the horse is much closer, and then I go, oh, wait a minute, this isn't working, the whole time that the horse has been coming at me, by me doing nothing or not offering any communication, has reaffirmed to the horse that the behavior is okay. So the sooner that we can interrupt that pattern of that charging and that taking over, which starts with where the horse is looking, with assessing the tension, the emotional state, the defensive behaviors, that they're communicating through their body, and addressing them. And again, when I'm interrupting those or I'm sending that horse off, I'm not then chasing them down. I'm not then critiquing them. I'm not then trying to corner them or direct them or make them be in a certain spot. All that I'm doing is saying, my personal space area is going to be much bigger, and here's I'm establishing the boundaries, if you will, and that horse who's learned how to become aggressive to protect themselves needs to be able to stop and mentally see me and consider me, and I need to help them through their emotions before I'm ever letting them get closer to me. So this is one of the things where I find people feel like they have to wait until the horse is offering the full-on unwanted response before they want to step in and interject, rather than recognizing the little and the subtle ways in which the horse is asking, and if we don't address them, then that escalates into the big dramatic unwanted behavior. So in terms of creating that boundary, as soon as that horse, let's say they were looking at me, they were tight, they were increasing in their energy and about ready to come in, and I create just enough pressure that that horse moves away, as soon as they move away from wherever I visualize that imaginary spatial boundary is, I'm going to give them a release. And so there is an association and an understanding as far as where the boundary is, and that they won't be critiqued for what they tried, and it's a emotionally neutral experience from the human.